So today we're actually going to go into political philosophy. This is a topic that was much requested, and so I thought it would be nice to have this as our final meeting. And yes, this is going to be our final meeting for this part of the course. However, there will be future updates, and I'll keep everyone updated. So yeah, let's first talk about what political philosophy is. I'm sure that most people do know what political philosophy is, but just in case, for those of you who might not, political philosophy is the study of fundamental questions about the state, government, politics, liberty, justice, and the enforcement of a legal code by authority. So basically, there's several questions in political philosophy that have been explored for thousands of years, ranging from what is the purpose of government to what is justice, what is liberty, what are rights, how should a legal code be enforced? Questions like these are all part of political philosophy. So in today's meeting, we're going to be going over 2 key people from ancient philosophy, 3 key people from modern political philosophy, and then we're going to be going over a central discussion question, which I'll talk about later. So the first question we're going to tackle today is, what is the purpose of government? So I guess this is our first discussion. What does everyone think the purpose of government is? Okay, so someone says to keep law and order. Okay, so that is one common purpose of government. But then my question is, what is the purpose of laws? And also, yeah, feel free to unmute. To keep order. Okay, well, that's not really. Okay, Maris says living a better life. So Maris, would you say that the government is to promote societal good? Okay, and what exact societal goods do you have to have a government for that you can't achieve individually?
Yeah, actually, I don't know the government what will do, but it just make maybe just let people live in a better life. I think so.
Okay, that's fair in general. Any other responses besides to keep law and order and to live a better life? Okay. Well, I was thinking of this as well, and I came up with several main ones. So the several possible purposes of government that I thought about were possibly government is to protect possessions. It could be to prevent harm and allow for cooperation. It could be to enforce the common good, which is what Maris said. It could be to protect the weak and limit the strong. Maybe government is to protect rights, or maybe it's to provide public services. So out of these, I guess making laws and keeping them falls under a lot of them. But yeah, these are the very prevalent definitions of what a government is for. So let's talk about rights then. Why is it important for a government to protect rights? Does anyone want to give a shot at that? Like, why is it important that we have a government in order to give rights? Why can't we just have individual people living by themselves? In that case, why would there not be rights? Okay, I guess I'll just answer that myself. So the answer for a lot of philosophers would be that it is impossible for individuals to maintain certain rights. For example, a weak individual is going to be unable to maintain their right of liberty and of autonomy because they could be easily overpowered by a strong individual. That's why there's a government, to ensure that these rights are being granted universally. Okay, so in today's meeting, we're going to be going over several key philosophers. We're going to talk about Plato, which I'm sure a lot of you know, Aristotle, which I'm also sure a lot of you know, and then we're going to talk about John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, and I believe John Rawls. Okay, so before I start this introduction to Plato, does anyone have any prior experience with Plato? Like, what do you think? Um, what does everyone know about Plato so far?
Plato is cool. It's damn cool, dude. That's the most cool people.
He's a cool dude. Okay. Well, Plato is a very important, wrote books. Yeah, he's a very important ancient Greek philosopher. He's made contributions to a lot of different fields of philosophy, and one of his main important contributions was to the field of political philosophy. Um, has anyone ever read Plato's Republic?
Yeah, I've read that.
Okay, nice. To summarize Plato's political philosophy, there are several points. First of all, Plato believed that the good government requires good leaders leading from the top, and he believed that these good leaders had to have moral and intellectual excellence. Plato was actually critical of democracy. He gave this example, or I think he gave this example, but yeah. Let's say that you have a medical problem. You can't you suddenly your heart starts hurting or your arm starts hurting or something like that. Someone would ask you, do you want to go to a doctor? And you probably want to go to a doctor, right? You probably want to go to someone that is qualified to solve your problem. Now, the argument for this is that if you wanted to go to a doctor, someone qualified, then it's important that we have a qualified leader. On the other hand, Plato would argue that democracy isn't a qualified leader. He argued that democracy was just having rule by the masses. For example, let's say that you have a medical problem again, and instead of going to a doctor, you instead decide to go to, I don't know, you instead decide to have everyone take a vote on what medical problem you have. Well, I'm sure that wouldn't be a very good way to solve that. So that's kind of Plato's reasoning behind why he's critical of democracy. Okay. Next, Plato believed that the ideal society must have social classes. He believed that the ideal ruler is the philosopher king, and the ruler has to be wise and virtuous. So this name, the philosopher king, kind of captures what he wants in a ruler. He wants a ruler that's both wise in philosopher and also virtuous and able to lead in king. So he thinks that it's best to have someone on top that's very knowledgeable and knows what they're doing in order to lead everyone else. Finally, Plato described that there were 5 types of regimes. There's aristocracy, timocracy, oligarchy, democracy, and tyranny. And these 5 regimes are listed in the order of which he thought that they were good. So he thought that the best was aristocracy, second best was timocracy, and so on and so forth, until the worst was tyranny. So, as you can see, obviously, while Plato disliked democracy, he still thought that democracy would be better than tyranny, which he defined as a corrupt leader that has absolute power. So does anyone have any questions on Plato's political philosophy? This is a very introductory glance at it.
Yeah, Justin, I'd want to know. The famous math is about the cave. Do you know that?
Yeah.
The cave. Can you explain that for me? Because I wanted to know that.
Um, how about after the lesson? Because that could take a bit. I don't want to go too much overtime because it seems like I always go overtime. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll answer your question after the meeting. Okay. If anyone doesn't have any other questions, let's talk about Aristotle. Aristotle is also another famous ancient Greek philosopher, and he was actually a student of Plato's. Aristotle believed that society and community are founded to achieve some good. So that's kind of what a lot of you said in the chat previously. To give a modern example, society is important to provide roads and transportation. Individuals can't build roads by themselves. It wouldn't be worth it for an individual to build a road because they would spend their life building a road and they'd die and it would not help anyone, or it would not help themselves. Whereas if you have a society, you can actually build a road and that road will allow a lot of people to benefit. So Aristotle believed that, in theory, monarchy and aristocracy are the best if there is a ruling class or family that is knowledgeable and virtuous. So in that, he kind of agrees with Plato. However, Aristotle actually preferred constitutional democracy, or what he called polity, in practice. This is because he believed that, while in theory it's good to have one knowledgeable ruler, in practice it's often the case that after you get one or two knowledgeable rulers, you could get screwed over by a really bad ruler. And if it was a monarchy, then and you get a really bad ruler, then that really destroys the society. So that's why he believes that in practice, it's safer to have a constitutional democracy. Now, it's important to note here that by constitutional democracy, Aristotle doesn't actually mean the type of democracy that we might currently see today. He actually thought that that kind of democracy was bad because he thought that mob rule is bad. Instead, he wanted constitutional democracy, which is like mob rule bound by a constitution. So has anyone seen this painting before? This is part of the painting.
Yeah, I know. We have seen that on the history class.
School of Athens? I believe that's what it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it is.
So it's actually really interesting. Let's take a look at this painting closer. You can see there's Plato on one side and Aristotle on the other side. Plato's the one on the left here. He's the guy with the big beard and he's pointing towards the sky. That's to symbolize that Plato was more of an idealist. He was thinking of political philosophy in terms of the ideal. He thought that ideally we should have a philosopher king that's so wise and so virtuous and can guide everyone to success. On the other hand, Aristotle is actually on the right. He's the one wearing the blue. Oh, someone says you can only see half. Okay, well, Aristotle's on the right wearing the blue, and he's actually pointing either to the ground or pointing forward. And that was supposed to represent the fact that Aristotle is much more practical. He understands that while in theory monarchy is better, in practice, sometimes monarchy doesn't work. So classically, Plato and Aristotle have been described as two kind of opposite camps in philosophy. Plato being the more idealistic one, and Aristotle being the more practical one. However, in reality, their thought is still similar in many ways, and they came from like the same culture, the same society, so they probably had more similarities than differences. So does anyone have any questions on Aristotle or Plato?
Yeah, I remember the Socrates is in this draw too. Where is it?
Sorry?
Is Socrates in this picture?
Socrates?
Socrates, no.
Wait, could you type his name in the chat?
Oh, nothing. Just never mind. Just carry on, please.
Okay. Yeah. This painting is much bigger than this. This is just one part of it. That's just the center that depicts Plato and Aristotle. Okay. So now we're actually going to be going into more modern philosophy, starting with the state of nature. So now we're going past the ancient Greeks, going all the way till about before the Renaissance and during like the Enlightenment in Europe. So this is a whole nother era. So first we're going to talk about the state of nature. Has anyone ever heard of the state of nature? Well, it's not literally nature, but okay. Well, in any case, the state of nature is the conditions of what the lives of people might have been like before societies came into existence. So essentially, the state of nature is a state in which there's people that live without a government. They just live freely and they govern themselves freely. And there's different political philosophers have had very different opinions on this, which have heavily influenced their view on the role of government. So before I move on to talk about John Locke and some other philosophers, what does everyone think about the state of nature? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it better than modern society, or is it worse? And is the current modern society the best way to alleviate these problems? So starting from the first question, how does everyone think the state of nature is without laws?
I agree. I agree with the state of nature because a human is the son of the nature. We should to live in the nature instead of to destroy it.
Okay, I think you're a bit misunderstood. So state of nature has nothing to do with nature. State of nature is just humans living without laws. and without government. Anyone else have any points on this? What does everyone think a society with no laws and no government would look like?
Not good.
Yeah, how so? I mean, what would be bad about it?
I mean, everyone could do what they want. It wouldn't be good.
Okay.
Murders everywhere, unhappiness everywhere, death everywhere,
Okay.
nothing everywhere.
Okay. So someone in chat, pseudonym Mortis says, everyone getting robbed. Okay, so that's also, like, I guess, a violation of personal property and rights. Okay, I'm curious. Who actually thinks that the state of nature might be good?
Me, some.
Do you want to explain?
I will later explain it in the chat, okay? Because I can't see that fluently because I don't know what the words will mean. Okay.
Okay. Sure. So Mortis says it might be if the city has a grip on itself, but nobody has to be responsible. Okay, so do you think that in the state of nature, people would act goodly in a good way? And do you think people would be responsible, or would people like devolve into chaos and start like stealing things and killing each other? So Mortis says if they were good people. Well, do you think they are good people? Do you think humans are inherently good or bad? Yeah, exactly. Emphasis on if, right? So the question is it like, are they good or bad? Well, we're actually going to talk about that in about 5 minutes when we talk about the differences between Locke and Hobbes. Okay, so now let's move on to John Locke. A lot of John Locke's ideas had to do with the state of nature, which is why we talked about the state of nature first. Has anyone heard of John Locke before? Hopefully most people have.
Yeah.
Okay. He's pretty famous, obviously. John Locke believed that humans are fundamentally good. He believed that, like, when you're born, you are fundamentally good, and people only become evil and start being corrupted by society as they grow up. However, he still believed that the state of nature is fundamentally bad. People, even though humans are fundamentally good, if you put them into a state of nature with no government and no laws, then the overall structure of that is going to be fundamentally bad. So these 2 points really influenced a lot of his political philosophy. John Locke was a huge supporter of fundamental rights. And he named 3 fundamental rights: life, liberty, and property. So let me ask everyone, what are the 3 rights that are, what are the 3 unalienable rights that the US Constitution talks about? Or sorry, the Declaration of Independence. Life is one, liberty. Yeah. What's the third one? Yeah, so it's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's what that document describes as the 3 unalienable rights. Similarly, so as we can see, that's very similar to John Locke's idea of fundamental rights. It's just that they replaced property with pursuit of happiness. So the point of that example is to show that John Locke has had a huge influence on the Constitution and other foundational parts of the US government, especially when we look at the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. This just goes to show that philosophy actually has had a huge impact on the world. It's shaped US government and many other governments to this day. So going back to John Locke, the reason that John Locke believed that state of nature is fundamentally bad is because he believed that the natural rights of life, liberty, and property are not protected in the state of nature. He claimed that since humans are rational, they wanted to find a way to protect their human rights, their natural rights. The solution is called the social contract, which is an agreement between humans to protect their own rights, to not infringe upon the rights of others. Locke also believed that humans must rule themselves based on everyone else's needs, meaning that he was a supporter of democracy. So let's really quickly talk about the social contract. As I already said, the social contract is kind of an agreement between society to live out and to respect other people's rights and to respect the government. Locke believed that the social contract was important because it took people out of the state of nature. It made sure that people weren't being violent or stealing or murdering, and it made sure that everyone is following the laws. Locke believes that with the social contract, everyone is benefited. Okay, are there any questions on John Locke?